Teachers at Reddit, who is one standout student that you'll remember for a very long time? I'm married to a teacher. One kid decided to chef on news that his family had burned their restaurant to the ground on the weekend to claim the insurance money. I had a student with autism who was a carbon copy of Napoleon Dynamite. Great sense of dry humor that I really enjoyed. He's still around town and works at a convenience store. Whenever I go in there to buy beer, he'll casually walk by me, wag a finger and, in cartoon fashion, whisper moderation. I teach first. I have a student with high anxiety if I'm not there. I had a funeral for my grandpa, so I front-loaded him with something like my grandpa went to heaven so I won't be here tomorrow. So and so will be the sub. He said okay. Walked away. Then came back a few minutes later and hugged me and said I'm sorry about your grandpa. You don't see much empathy from 6-year-olds. I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. My first year working in education. There was one kid that was super creative. He could turn anything into a game. He made a game with dominoes one time that I couldn't for the life of me beat. And I was seriously trying. He later confided in me that his ex-stepfather had hit his mom and been to jail several times. It broke my heart because he and his siblings were the sweetest kids. He said to me once, "I think we're all teachers," and that quote still rings true. 7 years later. Not necessarily a standout for positive reasons, but I once had a student arrested in the middle of class for robbing 3 separate banks across state lines. I'll certainly never forget that. 2 kids in 1 week stuck their tongues on a flagpole, exactly like Christmas Story, and another on a basketball standard. During -15-degree weather. One kid left a bloody chunk of tongue on the basketball standard. Another super nice high school kid would always say thank you after class. As in, thank you for teaching us. Semicolon. I had an international female student who started a family in an English-speaking country with a male from her home country. She was becoming Americanized, to her husband's dismay. So he kidnapped the baby back to his home country. For complicated reasons. The woman could not simply go back to her home country without disastrous consequences. The whole saga was absolutely heartbreaking. I have no idea how it turned out. The kid that brought dry ice to school. Wrote FCKU on the wall with his own shti. Put kid soap sculptures into the microwave in the teacher's lounge. Downloaded PRN on a school computer. Humped a dodgeball multiple times. Laid under his desk and humped the ground. Called from the classroom phone to order pizza. And whose father emailed me 3 times a day. Every day. For the entire year, all while CCing the superintendent on every email. That was a great year. Not while I was a teacher. But while I was an aide, there was a girl in the class who didn't talk. Everyone just assumed she was mute and would make fun of her for not talking. Even the teacher kinda brushed her off as oh so and so just doesn't speak, so don't worry about it. I don't know what that little kid went through or why she wouldn't talk to her classmates, but she could definitely talk and hated everyone in that class for being mean to her. I think about her all the time and often wonder how she's doing since she'd be entering high school pretty soon. Edit. Holy shit, there's a lot of kiddos out there who experienced way too much trauma. By too much I mean any. I'm sorry you guys had difficult childhoods and I hope you're all doing well now. If I or the teacher had suspected any type of neglect, we would have reported it, but I'm thinking it was just selective mutism. Which during my 8 years I did not know was a thing. I teach 8th grade. Last year, we lost one of our students in an accident right before fall break. From day one, he had been my favorite student. He was unbelievably kind and intelligent. Literally every single student had only positive things to say about him. I know that's typically how it goes when someone passes. But it wasn't like that with him. He was just one of those people you couldn't help but love. He was someone who would go out of his way to help those around him. And he brought out the best in his peers. A born leader. Then we lost him. I floundered for the rest of the year. I never felt like I completely regained my footing. I'm thankful for the time I had with him in my class. But I'm terrified of having to go through that again. I had one super sassy student who would always grimace when asked a question and give minimal effort in anything related to class. One day our school had a Halloween party and I was helping with a magic show when she ran up to me with her friend and said, "This is my favorite teacher," to her friend. She was smiling so much and so happy. And from that day on she was a brilliant kid showing her true potential. Always high five everyone in your class and make them blossom, fellow teachers. I'm the student here. But I recently saw a teacher of mine from high school and she still has an extra credit answer I drew for the last final I took for her. It was one of those joke extra credit questions where she asked something about Carthage and Rome. And I basically wrote an essay. Complete with maps. She gave me double extra credit points but I still failed the test. And her class. But I was still one of her favorite students. And she kept it. Taught high school theater and discovered a notebook that was being passed around mentioning a lot of high school drinking. So, one night instead of rehearsal, we staged an intervention with the cast of the show. We kept things very vague. Let the kids know we cared about them and talked to them frankly about some of our own experiences with addiction and depression. At the end of it, one student, someone who was not even mentioned in the notebook and I would have never suspected any of the things we talked about applied to him, pulled me aside and said, "I don't know how you guys figured it out. But yeah, I've been cutting. And I really appreciate you not calling me out in there." He got help soon thereafter. And is living a healthy life to this day. I teach where there was a school shooting. My student was shot and almost died. She survived because a specialist happened to be in town. When I visited with her in the hospital a couple days after, she asked how she could finish the class. Her drive was impressive. A student once asked me what his sister was like when she was in high school. We had been in the same year throughout high school and then went to the same college for a bit. So I knew her pretty well. Even though we weren't exactly friends. Great girl. Everyone loved her. She had this way of making you smile no matter how sad you felt. So I'm like, well, what is she up to these days? She must have recognized my name if you know we went to school together. Well, turns out she committed suicide a few months after our last semester together. Her brother was 9 at the time. And was now in my class 7 years later. He recognized me from her yearbook pictures. And just wanted to learn more about his sister from someone who got to see a different side of her. I subbed last year at a special education where there was a student that was 6'8" and 350 pounds. He punched me square in the chest as hard as he could when he couldn't get seconds in lunch. Won't be forgetting that one anytime soon. In my current position though, I don't think there is a single student I will forget. I am a trained music teacher but my school needed a kindergarten teacher for the year, so this is my first and probably last year doing this. It's been a very interesting and rewarding job but also incredibly challenging with every student requiring such different levels of attention. I had one student who had oppositional defiant disorder and spent his days being an abusive menace to everyone. He really was a nightmare and very much put me off teaching in case I ever had another student like him. I am no longer a teacher. Horrible. Abusive. Nasty piece of work. I really want to use stronger language. Not me but my civics teacher who tells this story every year when he eventually gets asked what was his weirdest student. Well, a few years back when cat headbands were popular, there was a girl who would always meow in class. She never spoke a word of English but would meow every response, including from other students. Sure, she failed every quiz because she couldn't answer it verbally, but I remember she passed with like a low A or high B. The first one who died tragically young after graduation. He reminded me of my oldest son. And was the most genuine and kind young man. He wasn't an especially good student. A kid who stabbed himself in the meat between your index finger and thumb and splattered the blood all over the room. I put post-its over all the blood marks so the custodian could find them more easily. I then tried to go about teaching, After said kid was in the nurse, and when I went to erase the board, little drops of blood went streaking everywhere. A kid who joked about bringing an AR-15 to school the day after the Stoneman Douglas shootings. I called security immediately. Knowing him, I think he just didn't get how seriously people take that kind of thing, but after 4 security guards and a campus SRO came to get him, I think he got the message. This was when I taught first grade. I had a student who would be perfectly happy and normal. Out of the blue he would flip a switch. He would look down or away, and then look back at you with this stare. It was like he could see in your soul. It was terrifying. He would throw things, like desks, try to stab people with stuff. His parents thought starting fires and hurting the neighborhood pets was a phase. Not a teacher, but I was in loco parentis for a group of CVOC, child victims of crime. One of the boys was severely disfigured. His parents had set fire to his room when he was a child, locked the doors and tried to kill him, but thankfully he was rescued, survived. I was having a tough week in work. I didn't think it was visible, but he came over to me and asked me what was wrong, and after talking said life is too short to torture yourself over the things that could have not or might happen. He must have been about 15 and showed more integrity and empathy than most people. I still think of him a lot and hope he is still as positive about life now as he was back then. Not only did he help in my current situation, he caused a butterfly effect and changed my perceptions. I like to think that I have used this experience from him to influence others in a similar situation. Jacob. I had Jacob all 4 years that he was in high school. Freshman year he was completely obnoxious. The kids hated being near him. He was always making off-the-wall comments, and nearly failed the class. Over the course of the next 3 years he totally matured and turned around his academics, eventually finishing his senior year with a B+ in my class, and he participated in a bunch of my extracurricular activities. One fun story. We were at a competition for school and he participated in a costume contest. He was supposed to be Odysseus and made his own homemade fake blood out of corn syrup and chocolate. I will always remember him horrifying the 2,000+ people there while he licked his fake blood off himself. The competition actually banned fake blood after that. I appreciated his dedication and sense of humor. He had a rough family life, so we stayed and stay in touch so I can check in on him. He's doing amazingly well in college and he was even in my wedding. Edit. Not a teacher, but about a teacher. He was the IT teacher at school and did all the networking, sysadmin etc work with no pay, but just because he enjoyed it. He was idolized by everyone he ever taught and was a man who even the kids outside of his class, kids who didn't care about school, would smoke in behind the sheds and start fights etc. Everyone loved him. He was a boxer and a carpenter before becoming a teacher. So a real man's man, but just loved IT work and kids too. Unfortunately he developed prostate cancer 7 years ago and passed away not long after. Left a wife, twins and a daughter, kids all under 5 years old. Left a massive impact on my life. All the teachers at the school and more students than you could imagine. He had a public funeral at the town hall, with hardly any standing room left. An absolute inspiration of what a teacher should be, and it can be incredibly personal while still maintaining student-teacher professionalism. Still a man that people talk about to this day and still an inspiration to so many who knew him. Terrible student who had a parent threatening to sue the school for everything the kid did wrong if we dared punish them. We said that the student isn't learning, any actions have consequences, and soon this person will be 18. The school kept caving because they didn't have the money to defend a lawsuit even if they won. Person is now an adult in jail for life for a rash of horrific and brutal crimes. Wasn't even a month after graduating they started their crime spree. I also had a student beg me to be his mom. He was in kindergarten and didn't want to go home and just pleaded with me to take him home, saying he didn't need a lot and he would be really good. It's one of the few times I couldn't keep it together and turned around and started uncontrollably sobbing in front of other students. He was being removed from his house that evening and CPS had foster care lined up for him. I hope wherever he is okay. I was 21 at the time and living in a 1-bedroom basement apartment, or I might have considered taking him. My wife is an elementary school teacher. 6 or 7 years ago, for Valentine's Day, the kids were assigned to write haikus about love. A student wrote a poem that pops into my mind from time to time. Love is a fat man who likes to poop on Sundays. Lovable fat man. 575. Way to go, Nick. You legend. I started in my first classroom this past July. It is a full special education elementary classroom. I had a very strong connection with one of the students. He had cerebral palsy and was nonverbal. But you always knew what he needed and how he was feeling. He was sweet and enjoyed life. His home life wasn't the greatest, but he loved being at school with his friends and teachers. He passed away in September. I'll never forget that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach when the staff in my classroom got called down to the principal's office and we were told. It was one of the worst things I've ever experienced. I'll always carry him with me. Not a teacher, but in my high school we had a student in my class that they called the tickler. This dude would refuse to keep his hands to himself. He'd pick a random F-king time during class to try and tickle someone. And he had it really bad for our algebra teacher. That poor lady was so damn uncomfortable. I don't know why the FCK the school let him stay there as long as he did. Seriously, he was always getting detentions and being removed from class. But he would seriously try and tickle people during class at random. Anyways, he got up during class when my algebra teacher was writing on the board. Walks up behind her and starts tickling her. I'm not sure exactly what or why. But long story short, his tickling caused our teacher to piss herself in class and she bolted out of class on the verge of tears. He got suspended for a week after that. Again, I have no f-king clue why they let him get away with this shit. But after Christmas break he was no longer at our school. I taught at a non-profit high school for students with behavioral issues in a pretty bad part of town. Had a student jump the fence, under 18, so we had to follow and find a syringe in the gutter. He held it up like a weapon. We tried to talk him down. He then stabbed himself all over. Arms, legs, torso, etc. Edit. For those interested. This was at a private school and the student ended up getting sent away for his participation in a violent assault attempted murder a few years later. Also, we wouldn't know about his HIV bloodborne pathogen status since. At the time and last I checked, it's illegal in California to share medical info about minors. Yes. That means that we often had to restrain violent teens covered in bloodshed etc. without knowing whether or not it would kill us. The reason this particular law exists is so kids aren't discriminated against for medical conditions. I do understand the logic, but it can be dangerously unfair to educators working in the trenches of inner city special ed. I had a student who really struggled with depression. One day we were doing an activity in class and he asked me if I had seen Dead Poets Society. I said, yes. I love that movie. He then said, I was watching it with my grandma and the main teacher reminded me of you. Yeah. I will never forget that kid or how he made my father tear up when I told him the story and he watched the movie for the first time ever. Kevin. Kid that locked the bathroom door from the outside while no one was in there, causing a massive headache during an open house. Still have no idea how the FCK he managed that. He also cut his hand open punching a padded wall and needed stitches. I have a short list of students who, if I ever find out, became heinous criminals later in life, I would not be surprised. I'm not a teacher, but my dad is and he has told me about one of his, shall we say, more interesting students. He wore a black trench coat to school, gave the teachers he liked apples every day and smoked a pipe. Chap, but he was apparently very good at physics. Not a teacher, but back when I was a 17-year-old camp counselor, this really popular well-behaved kid in my bunk of 8-year-olds stood up to 10 other kids bullying the socially inept weirdo from the broken household. Said something like guys leave him alone and they just stopped right away. Sort of blew my 17-year-old mind and changed my entire picture of humanity forever.